My name is Alex Tulip, and I'm the Zero Waste Campaign Director for US PIRG. I'll be your moderator for today. I'm here in snowy, believe it or not, Denver. And I'd love to see where all of you attendees are from. So please drop your name and location in the chat if you feel so inclined. We'd love to see where everyone is tuning in from. A few logistics before we get started. This webinar is being recorded for posterity. Because of all of the great speakers we have lined up, we won't have time for questions. But please feel free to email us if you have any. Myself and the Zero Waste team, we here have an opportunity to work with our entire network of PIRG and environment organizations all across the country at the state and federal level. And because of that, we're allowed a unique appreciation for all of the hard work that's being done and the progress that's being made across the country to fight plastic waste and pollution. And that's in part why we're hosting this event. We want to share with you all of these stories and how you can continue to play an active role. We all know that plastic has infiltrated every corner of our planet, and the United States generates more plastic waste than any other country in the world. Whether our disposable plastic products end up in the local landfill or local waterways or in a barge halfway across the world, we face an enormous challenge and responsibility to reduce our plastic in order to protect the planet and ourselves. And we do so, as many of you know, in opposition to some of the most powerful industries in the world, fossil fuel companies and consumer good companies that profit from the status quo making disposable plastic products. Thankfully, there are efforts underway across the country to advance solutions that match the scale and comprehensiveness of the problem. We've already seen some really encouraging progress. To give you an example, when I started in this position a little over 3 years ago, only one state, California, had passed legislation to ban or restrict a single-use plastic product. But fast forward to today, and 11 states have banned single-use plastic shopping bags, and another 6, and soon a 7th, stick around to hear about that, will have banned polystyrene foam, or what a lot of us call styrofoam food containers. So that's an order of magnitude increase in roughly 3 years. Similarly, this year, we've seen nearly a dozen states introduce legislation to hold makers and sellers of plastic waste and plastic packaging responsible for the cost of their wasteful products. That's up from, I believe, just 2 states last year. And finally, last but not least, federal lawmakers have recently reintroduced a bill that assembles many of these great ideas from across the country, ideas that have been proven to work at the state and local level in order to provide an example of where we need to be. And so I am thrilled to have many of the incredible leaders behind these efforts that I've spoken about with us today. And without further ado, I'd like to start our tour of the country, if you will, in the state of Massachusetts. We have Executive Director of MassPIRG and esteemed zero waste advocate, Janet Dominitz, to kick us off. Janet?
Thanks so much, Alex. It is great to be here today, and we're really honored to have a leader not just on the issues of plastic reduction and waste, but a leader in the state legislature of Massachusetts. We're so lucky to have Rep. Marjorie Decker championing a couple of the most important bills, and it's my pleasure to introduce her as the first stop on this important tour.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you to all of my fellow legislative colleagues around the country. It's really, I get very excited seeing you on this Zoom with me and knowing that people throughout our nation are really not only watching this, but supporting us and counting on us to collectively really make some big, profound changes in business as usual. We know that our states are not islands. And when I think about 2 of the bills that I'm focusing on this year, well, I'll start with, as a city councilor in Cambridge over a decade ago, I worked for 3 years successfully to eliminate plastic bags in our city. And I think about how hard that was, and it's been inspiring to see it catch on. People understand the importance of eliminating single-use waste plastic products. When I think about taking on the plastic industry, the fossil fuel industry, their playbooks, they come straight out of the tobacco industry. And we know that because, in fact, often they're the same players in this. And I think about, in Massachusetts, we are trying to expand our definition of a packaged beverage drink. When we started this work, we left out, there were no sports drinks, and bottled water was not a thing back then. We need to have a realistic approach to understand either we really want to reduce waste because we understand that plastic is literally killing our planet, killing our wildlife, killing our oceans and our fish, And just as importantly, it's killing us. And I think about the work that we want to do on banning polystyrene. Styrene is a known carcinogenic. It's something that we know. And this idea that we have information, just like we did as we began to tackle the tobacco industry. We have a lot of research, we have a lot of data, and therefore we have a choice to make as elected officials across the country, and most importantly, as advocates who will hold us accountable. Do we act on the information we have? Do we know, in fact, there's no ER for the planet, there's no emergency room to go once we've ruined our oceans and once we've ruined our wildlife? And I think about being a mom. I have 2 kids, and I'm sure for many of you across the nation and across the globe right now, being in this pandemic, it forces all of us to pause and say, are we really taking the responsibility and using the platforms we have to create a safer world? And we can't do it alone. We can't do it just as individuals. We can't do it just as states. We need to be doing it collectively, and to be part of a group of incredible legislators across the country who understand that our lives are at stake, that the unfairness and the injustice to the future, to our children, they are counting on us to get it right. And we've had enough information for a long time. And so really now it's a choice. It's a movement that is actually calling on us to make a choice to respond and to save our planet, to save our lives, to save our wildlife. And I look forward to seeing how each of you do, and collectively knowing that our success will benefit people across this nation, and feeling deeply compelled that there's no alternative here. There's no alternative but to act on this information and to reduce plastics wherever, and to reduce single-use waste wherever we can. It's an obligation, it's a moral obligation, and I'm ready to act on this, and I'm excited to be with you in partnership. Thank you for having me here with you today. Thank you to MassPIRG for all of your incredible advocacy and your work. I was inspired by your work as a college student, and I'm really grateful to be here in partnership with you as a legislator in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Representative Decker. What a wonderful start to this tour. I want to make sure that those of you attending know that we're going to be dropping actions that you can take for each one of the states that we'll be touring. So look out in the chat for web action links. We'll be pasting those during and after each of our speakers. That's obviously an important part of what we're doing here, making sure that we can all take action. We're going to head south now, down the Atlantic coast of the Chesapeake Bay in the state of Maryland, to hear from Director Emily Scarr to keep us going. Emily?
Hi, thanks, Alex. My name is Emily Scarr. I'm the director of Maryland PIRG, based in Baltimore. I know we have a lot of folks on the phone because there were some issues with the stream link. So I just dropped a link to the Facebook stream as well for folks to see around. So you're not missing much with our beautiful faces, I'll tell you that. And we're certainly recording everything in case you miss any. But I'm really thrilled and honored to get to invite Delegate Sarah Love, who's a state legislator in Maryland. She served since 2018, has been a real true champion on addressing the plastic pollution crisis, as well as other environmental and public health issues. Delegate Love lives in Montgomery County, and I think she's here with us right now. Delegate Love?
Thanks, Emily. And thank you so much, everyone, for having me. I'm happy to be here. As Emily said, I am a delegate from the state of Maryland. I serve on the Environment and Transportation Committee, and it was really on that committee that I started to understand the plastic crisis that we are facing. I am proud that Maryland has banned polystyrene, but we have so much more to do. For 3 years, I have had a bill to reduce our reliance on single-use plastic. It hasn't gotten out of committee yet, but I have high hopes for next year. We've also passed out of the House 2 years running a ban on those single-use plastic bags. Unfortunately, that hasn't gotten out of the state Senate. Excuse me. But I wanted to highlight for you a different bill that I have this year that's really new and exciting. It came out of some work that I was doing over the interim on a work group on waste and recycling. We really did a deep dive into Maryland's waste and recycling system, and we heard from our jurisdictions how challenging it is and how much plastic pollution is really costing them. And when I said that we cannot recycle our way out of this crisis, a lobbyist said, oh, yes, we can. We have advanced recycling. And I thought, wow, that's great, until I learned about it. So what this is it's actually a chemical conversion process where they extract the fossil fuels, they turn it into plastic, the plastic is used, then using different forms of chemical conversion, they convert that plastic back into fossil fuel, emitting a huge amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And then that fossil fuel is burned again. And what's interesting and concerning is that the chemistry industry and the fossil fuel industry are going through the states and trying to get this process enshrined in state law as manufacturing rather than a chemical process, because there's less regulation, and they're also trying to get state incentives. So I actually, with the help of Emily and excuse me, some other advocates, had the first in the nation bill to ban this process, because it really is a false solution and will do more damage to our environment. And it really incentivizes the use of single-use plastic, which we know is not the direction we want to go in. Had a great hearing, didn't go anywhere because it's a new concept, but I'm really excited to have worked with the advocates and have brought this forward. So happy to answer any questions if folks want to send them to me to my state email. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Representative Love. I know that we are excited to take on plastic to fossil fuel conversion nationally, but we really thank Maryland for being a leader in that respect and showing us that it's possible and showing us how to get things started. For those of you attendees who are on the phone due to Zoom troubles, I would encourage you to tune into either our US PIRG or Environment America Facebook pages. We have our video live streaming there as well, if that works out. Next, we're going to jump over the border to my home state of Pennsylvania, go Birds, and Farron Savitz to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, I'm Farron Savitz. I'm the Conservation Associate with Penn Environment based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, State Representative Diane Herron. And Rep. Herron has been leading the charge against plastic pollution here in Pennsylvania, first as the mayor of Westchester Borough, where they passed one of the first bans on single-use plastic bags in the Commonwealth. And now, as a member of the General Assembly, she continues to lead that fight, representing Westchester and other parts of Chester County. Rep. Herron?
Yes, thank you, Farron, and thank you for having me today and for putting this all together. So I'm just going to jump right into the story that we have here in Pennsylvania and this fight against single-use plastics. When I was mayor of Westchester back in 2017, I was approached by a group of 5th grade students from our local elementary school who said, why can't we ban single-use plastic bags and straws in our community? And I said, well, you're absolutely right. Why can't we? So we worked really hard for 8 months, and we brought this forth to our borough council. And in July of 2019, our borough council in Westchester Borough signed a local law to ban single-use plastic bags and straws. Within several weeks, we were preempted by the state of Pennsylvania from doing so due to a last-minute rider that was injected into the fiscal code in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, preempting municipalities from banning single-use plastics. And this was the consequence of the Senate Majority Leader at the time, who had a plastic bag manufacturer in his district. This was renewed the following year. And so Westchester Borough, along with, I think it's 2 other local municipalities that have since tried to ban the bags, along with the city of Philadelphia, who is also wanting to ban bags. We have petitioned the court to sue the state because we view this as an egregious abuse of power and a violation of the one bill, one subject rule that we have here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So that effort is currently underway. And I do want to add just really briefly that Here in my district, we have a natural gas liquids pipeline that runs right through our highly developed areas that carries liquids from the Marcellus Shale fracking area of the state down to a refinery near Philadelphia for no other purpose than to send these refined liquids overseas to make plastics. And this has caused huge disruption and safety issues in our community, not to mention greenhouse gas pollution, significant amounts. So we will not quit. We will not stop this fight here in Pennsylvania. And the last thing I want to add is the last piece of our fight is that a fellow legislator and I are introducing legislation in Harrisburg that will give local municipalities the authority to protect the fundamental constitutional rights of their constituents and enable them to protect their constituents from harm that is caused by corporate overreach and by governmental overreach at the state level. And we call this our community rights legislation. And we are hoping that we can start to move this forward so that our local municipalities can take their power back and do things like pass bans against unnecessary single-use plastics. So we're excited to be here. We're excited to be working on this with you all and to see all the great progress that's happening across the country. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Representative Herron. I know that local preemption is something that a lot of states are dealing with similarly to Pennsylvania, and restrictions to municipal action. And we really appreciate Pennsylvania taking the lead in fighting back against that. We're going to head across the country now to the West Coast in California. And we have California Director Emily Rush to keep this conversation going. Take it away.
Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. It's really inspiring to hear about the leadership from state legislators all around the country on the issue of the absurd amount of plastic pollution and plastic waste that we're creating and all of the harmful health and environmental impacts of that. I am proud to introduce State Senator Ben Allen, who represents the west side of Los Angeles. Next, Senator Ben Allen's been a friend and longtime environmental advocate and has worked closely with CalPIRG and Environment California and the environmental community at large over the past several years, in particular by introducing SB 54, the Circular Economy and Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, which is a comprehensive bill to reduce food, all single-use, all packaging and single-use foodware by disposable foodware by 75% over the next 10 years, and make sure that everything that we're using can either be recycled or composted going forward. This bill faced immense opposition over the last 2 years, came within 4 votes of passing last year, and has both inspired, he's reintroduced that bill. It's being heard soon in the legislature. His actions have inspired a whole package of bills to be introduced this year, taking on pieces of the problem. And advocates have even gotten together to put an even stronger initiative pending signatures on the ballot in 2022. So thank you, Senator, for being here. Thank you for your leadership, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Emily. I appreciate it. I'm literally, I'll tell everybody, I'm on my second day of having taken I took my Moderna shot my second Moderna shot yesterday. So I'm glad I took it, but I'm not glad I took it today. So anyhow, I'm here, and I do want to make the point that I'm here because I care so much about this issue, and I wanted to be here with all of you and say, tip my hat to my fellow legislators from all over the country who are taking on leadership roles in this incredibly important issue. I feel for you in Pennsylvania that you got to deal with local preemption. What a crazy thing to have to deal with, especially from people who claim to think that government ought to be government decision-making ought to be made we're closest to the people. But in California, fortunately, we don't have to worry about those kinds of bills. And if anything, what we're really trying to do is a comprehensive statewide strategy that leverages the size and the power of our economy, which is, the fifth largest economy in the world on its own, in partnership with a number of sister states from around the country and with Canada as well, to really change the game. And as Emily said, the premise of this bill is simple. We shift responsibility for the end of life management of this material from the local residents who are having to pay more and more money to waste haulers and to their waste management folks at the city level. We shift the responsibility for the management from the local residents and communities to the producers, the folks who actually have the power to really determine whether the items that they produce and put out onto the market are truly recyclable, compostable, reusable, etc. And the idea is to ensure that they cover the cost to collect and sort and process the material instead of the taxpayers. The other thing is it also requires producers to reduce the amount of single-use waste being produced by right-sizing packaging. There's way too much waste that's totally unnecessary for a consumer, and switching to reusables where possible. And then lastly, we require the single-use material that remains on the market be fully recyclable or compostable. And to ensure this recyclability, the bill includes mandated recycling rates that producers had to achieve. As has been discussed, something like a third of all plastic is just used once, it's thrown away. The plastic offers us just a few minutes of convenience, but it lasts hundreds or thousands of years in landfills and in our ocean. Part of the issue, of course, is undoubtedly how confusing it is for consumers to know what's actually recyclable in their communities and what's not. In fact, the Consumer Brands Association recently did a study on this, and they found that for many Americans, recycling is actually one of the most confusing things in life. It's more confusing than building IKEA furniture. It's more confusing than doing your taxes. It's more confusing than playing the stock market. It's also more confusing than understanding your spouse. And so, so we know that many consumers look at an item, they see the recyclable chasing arrow symbol, they dutifully put it into their blue bin. We know that this is kind of wish cycling. It ultimately contaminates the waste stream, the recycling stream. It actually makes it more costly to sort and clean this the truly recyclable material. I subscribe to the Los Angeles Times. I'm an LA guy. My newspaper unfortunately comes in a little plastic bag every day, at least most days. And for a long time, I was just putting it in my recycling bin because it had the chasing arrow symbol on it. But of course, we all know that if anything, those bags were actually making the system worse. While they were technically recyclable, the truth of the matter is they were gumming up the machines. They were getting into the paper system, contaminating our paper, and actually making recycling more difficult. So by doing what I thought was the right thing, I actually was making things a little bit worse. So we've got another bill. It's part of this package that Emily mentioned so current law in California prohibits a manufacturer from making an untruthful environmental claim such as earth-friendly or recyclable if it's not truly earth-friendly or recyclable. And so the idea is that this bill would extend that prohibition to the use of the chasing arrow symbol. Material is not recyclable. It also offers clear guidance on what in fact constitutes recyclability. And so the idea is that this is going to empower consumers to make more informed purchasing decisions and get a better understanding of the system and how problematic it is. We've got a number of bills, as was mentioned, that include trying to take a page out of Oregon's reusable beer bottle system. There's a lot of great bills that we can post the information in the chat, take a look at it. And we do just continue to want to work in very close coordination with our friends, both at the federal level and also across the states. This effort that we're all engaged in right now has the industry back on its heels. And we're just going to keep pushing because it's so vitally important, both for future generations, but also for local government budgets. And with that, I want to thank CalPIRG and all the folks from PIRG from across the country who've been working so hard on engaging legislators on this important issue.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Thank you for all the work you're doing in California to push the boundary. I really hope we see this truthful labeling movement really gain some steam across the country. And I love that recycling is more confusing than bit. I might steal some elements from that. Next, we're going to head up Highway 5 to the state of Oregon, and our Oregon Director, Celeste Mayfrin-Swango, to introduce our next speaker.
Hi, Alex. So I'm Celeste Mayfrin-Swango. I'm the State Director with Environment Oregon. I'm really excited to introduce one of our biggest champions on plastic pollution in Oregon, State Representative Janine Salmon, who, despite being in floor session right now, has pulled away to come and talk to us. But Representative Salmon was the driving force behind the passage of the Sustainable Shopping Initiative, which is our ban on single-use plastic bags back in 2019. And she's here today to talk about her efforts around producer responsibility. So with that, Representative Salmon, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm Janine Salmon, the state representative from the beautiful state of Oregon. And I am talking to you from the halls of the Oregon State Capitol. I am here today to champion for my state and all states to maintain their natural beauty and eliminate overconsumption and overproduction of plastics. Thank you to U.S. Berg and Celeste Mayfrin-Swango of Environment Oregon for inviting me to join you today. In 2019, I was one of the chief sponsors that passed the statewide plastic ban, and the urgency to reduce our use of plastic is what compels me to continue to do this work. Building off our success with passing the plastic bag ban in 2019, we were interested in figuring out a more transformational approach to dealing with the problem of plastic solution. For the past year, I have been working with a group of advocates and experts to develop a framework around producer responsibility program for plastic packaging and paper products. A big reason why plastic pollution is on the rise is because producers are absolved of all the responsibility for where their products end up, leaving you and me with limited choices when buying consumer goods and then footing the bill for actually managing the waste. That fundamentally has to change. Many of us are already familiar with producer responsibility programs for hazardous waste products, such as batteries, paint, mercury thermostats, carpet, pesticides, tires, pharmaceuticals, the list goes on. Dozens of states have programs already in place for these items, including many here in Oregon. So producer responsibility programs work because they change the incentives that make the wastefulness so cheap. So when manufacturers are held responsible for their products at the end of their lives, they tend to make different choices when designing their products in the first place, making them more reusable, repairable, recyclable, and resilient. So it's only fair that producers have a financial responsibility for the problems that for their products and their packaging. Consumers and local governments have shouldered this responsibility alone for way too long. Producer responsibility is a proven approach to reducing waste and improving recycling, because as long as individuals, governments, our environment, and future generations, not producers, bear the costs of the waste, the producers who design and make the products we buy have no incentive to change. So unfortunately, the legislative session, we've run into some roadblocks working to get a full producer responsibility program here passed. But there is another proposal that would establish a shared responsibility model, one where producers are brought in to start paying for some of the costs of the system. It's not everything that we want, but it's a good start, and it's better than what we have now. So I'm hopeful we can pass something meaningful to bring producers in and to modernize our recycling system this year, then build off that for the years to come. The reality is we aren't going to recycle our way out of this problem. We know that recycling alone cannot deliver all the environmental protections that we need, especially when dealing with plastic waste. Right now, less than 9% of plastics are recycled. Preventing waste from being created in the first place will get us much closer to meeting our environmental goals and protecting the environment for future generations. Remember, it's reduce, then it's reuse, then it's recycle. So if your bathtub is overflowing, you don't start bailing out the water before you start turning off the tap. You need to turn off the plastic tap, or the problem of plastic solution in our environment, in our communities, will only get worse. Producer responsibility is one tool in our toolbox to make that happen. And I'm looking forward to continuing this work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Salmon. And thank you for reminding us of the foundational principles of zero waste. And thank you all also to the legislators who have taken their time out of their busy schedules, floor votes, COVID shots, Certainly not least, we will be finishing up in our final state for today, the beautiful state of Washington, and we have Mandy Appa to introduce our final speaker. Go ahead, Mandy.
Thank you, Alex. I'm Mandy Appa, Campaign Associate with Environment Washington, based in our beautiful Evergreen State. I am very excited to introduce and welcome Washington Senator Mona Das of the 47th Legislative District. Senator Das has been dubbed the plastics warrior of the Senate and wears that badge very proudly. We are so thankful to have someone as passionate as Senator Das in our legislature. This session, she has championed Senate Bill 5022, a comprehensive bill aimed at curbing plastic pollution in Washington that has now passed both the Senate and the House. So without further ado, I will welcome Senator Das.
Thank you so much for the great introduction, Mandy, and thank you everyone for being here. It is a true honor, especially to be with so many of my colleagues that deeply care about this issue. It's great to see everyone and be here together. You know, we have accomplished so much, but we all know that we have so much more to do. And one thing that I had somebody share with me recently, the senator from or the representative from Oregon mentioned reduce, reuse, recycle, but there's a new thing to add to the front of that, which is refuse. And I love that, because that's what we're doing with these EPR bills, is we're refusing to accept the responsibility that is given to us by the producers who make these decisions. And so I do want to share a little bit of my story, and I'll tell you about the couple bills that I've passed over the last couple of years. But for me, my journey began when I moved to Ireland in early 2003. It was a time before the United States was really worried about plastic, or at least I was. And I didn't have a car when I lived there. And folks, you always knew when someone was going to the grocery store because they would have an armful of plastic bags under their arm. And for me, the first time I went to the grocery store, I had no idea. And they said, you have to pay 5 cents for a bag. And I was like, what? And that was, I will tell you, the first time and the last time I paid 5 cents for a bag. I always made sure I had bags in my jacket pockets, in my purse, and my backpack, because that incentive, that 5 cent charge, just did change something in my wiring that made me want to make sure I never had to pay that again. And, move forward many years later when I became a legislator. And last year we passed the bag ban, or the reusable bag act. And it took me 2 years to pass it, but we did pass it last year, which was, incredible. And this year we started off with an EPR bill to, as other folks have mentioned today, to make the producers responsible. We realized with COVID and, with the nature of a remote session, we were 100% remote session this year, that was a little bit too much to choose. So instead, we really had, a very strong and very determined approach to revamp our recycling system here. So I'm proud to say, as Mandy mentioned, this bill has already passed the House and Senate. And after one quick concurrence vote early next week, should be on the way to the governor's desk, hopefully next week, which is really exciting. I've always believed that if something is not, in 2021, we have the technology, we know nothing should be produced if it is not recyclable, reusable, and compostable. And I will tell you that the folks here in Washington have been put on notice, and they know that this bill is coming next year. And with the passage of 5022, we do have a very comprehensive work group. So the proponents, or the I guess not proponents, but the opposite side knows that the bill is coming back next year. So I'm really excited about that. But let me just tell you what 5022 does. And some of the pieces of this bill are really groundbreaking for our country, and we hope that other states will follow. One of the most proud pieces of it are that we got together with the producers to come up with the definition of producer and producer responsibility. And we are hoping, and I've heard that Oregon and California are also going to be up using that language in the bills that they're using right now. So what is the actual producer responsibility piece? So we're excited about that. This bill will ban a lot of styrofoam or polystyrene. It will be the peanuts, which we all hate, the coolers, which I believe is first in the nation, and foodware like the clamshells, plates, and cups. So I'm really excited about that. I absolutely hate styrofoam. We have 2 styrofoam manufacturers in the state of Washington. We went up against them. Last year they won, this year we won, and they knew it was coming. And DART has actually told us that they realize that their business model is outdated, and so they are looking into what they're going to do next, which I'm really excited about. The second part of the bill requires all food serviceware, like to go, and especially during COVID, we're all getting more and more to go, that it is all upon request. So that includes utensils, that includes cup lids, it includes straws. And so that part is really exciting. And then the third thing that it does is requires the minimum recycled content. And we went against the dairy industry, and I am happy to say we won against the dairy industry. It was a hard battle. So all plastic beverages, and I'll say the beverage industry has been amazing. They really worked with us and were champions of this bill throughout. So I want to give them a shout out. But the dairy industry went very unwillingly, but we got them. Well, we didn't get them there. We had the votes to get there. So that was great. It will also require minimum recycled content in things like laundry detergent bottles, shampoos, conditioners, and trash bags, which I think is also one of the first states in the nation to do that. And then I think Senator Allen talked about this too, the chasing arrows. So we were no longer requiring the chasing arrows on packaging because we know absolutely how confusing that is. So we know that we are, leaders in a lot of ways, and really look forward to working and have been working with Oregon and California. And I really do believe in this blue wall legislation. And if the 3 of our states can pass some of these things, then other states can easily follow and use our language. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And truly, it's been a partnership with so many organizations, so many people on this call. I want to just thank everyone. And it's really so wonderful to hear from other legislators who are fighting the same battles in their states. And it makes me really happy to know I'm part of like a nationwide solution. And I'm really excited about the bill they introduced in Congress this year. So thank you so much for having me. And I know together we can have a more healthier and sustainable future. And I look forward to being part of it.
Thank you. Echoing, Senator Doss is the best. Thank you, Senator Doss. And again, thank you all of our state leaders and legislators taking time out of your busy schedules to speak today. I feel very inspired. A quick reminder for those of you attending, check the chat for actions you can take in your state for all of the states that we've heard from. And for those of you who are posting on social media, use the hashtag #UsAgainstPlastic. That's US Against Plastic. Before we jump to federal legislation, we want to share an opportunity to talk about a campaign of ours to encourage better corporate action. And for that, we have Environment America associate Reno Hippa. Reno, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So my name is Reno Hippa, and I'm an Oceans Associate with Environment America, working to put our wildlife over waste by reducing plastic pollution. As you've all heard, plastic is a huge problem for our planet. And a major source of that plastic is single-use plastics packaging specifically, such as food wrappers. No one should have to make the choice between shopping for groceries wrapped in single-use plastics and going without everyday essentials. So in addition to passing legislations at the state and federal level, companies need to step up by eliminating plastics from their operations. And that work should start with one of the places most familiar to us all, grocery stores. Whole Foods, which has a stated mission to nourish people in the planet, led the supermarket industry on reducing plastic waste as the first US grocer to eliminate plastic bags at checkout in 2008. But in a 2020 report by As You Sow, a shareholder advocacy group, the company received an F for failing to tackle the plastic pollution crisis. Whole Foods has not adopted a comprehensive plan or policy to reduce its plastic footprint, nor does it report on its overall plastic usage. But we know that Whole Foods can lead on reducing plastic waste. And that begins by making a bold commitment to eliminate single-use plastic from its 365 store brand product line and engaging its national brand suppliers on developing reusable and packaging-free alternatives. Whole Foods is in a strong position to make these changes, and its customers, along with the environmental community, want to see this change happen. That's why more than 130 groups joined our organizations last month in sending the Whole Foods CEO, John Mackey, a letter urging him to commit to this bold plan for tackling the plastic pollution crisis. However, weeks later, we have not gotten a response from the company. So everyone here can help convince Whole Foods to take action and tackle plastic waste by sending an email to the company. Share why you want Whole Foods to put planet over plastic. And to do that, we have put together a how-to guide on writing and submitting a letter to Whole Foods, and we'll put that link in the chat. Could everyone here just take 10 to 15 minutes following the event to send Whole Foods a letter? That could be a really powerful show of force in our fight against plastic pollution. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn things back over to Alex.
Thank you, Reno. And yeah, always comforting to know that these fights are happening on multiple fronts, through corporate action, through good policy. Our last speaker couldn't be here live due to his congressional schedule, but will be speaking to us nonetheless. Representative Alan Lowenthal is the lead sponsor in the U.S. House of Representatives for the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. All of the participants here can take action on this one as well as the Whole Foods one by clicking on what will be a link in the chat in just a moment. We've had the pleasure of working with Representative Lowenthal and his staff, as well as Senator Merkley this year in the Senate, for a couple years now on this bill. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over virtually to the representative to talk a little bit about that bill.
Hello, I'm Congressman Alan Lowenthal, and I want to thank you for inviting me to speak today. I am sorry, though, that I couldn't be there live. First and foremost, I want to thank USPIRG and Environment America for all of your hard work and dedication to protecting our environment. But specifically, I want to thank you for your leadership in trying to address the plastic pollution crisis and your critical support for the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It's been a pleasure to work with Alex Truelove, the director of USPIRG's Zero Waste Campaign, and everyone else on your federal and state teams. Thank you also to the state representatives who you've already heard from, who are leading important efforts on the state level to help address our broken recycling system in the plastic pollution crisis and helping us to build a more circular economy. The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act incorporates best practices and important common sense policies and is a roadmap to meaningfully tackle this crisis. While it may be ambitious, it is by no means radical. These policies are already being implemented by cities, states, and in other countries. This legislation ensures that our communities are protected from the health and environmental impacts of plastic production pollution and waste, and that our communities and municipalities are no longer burdened with having to foot the bill for cleanup and for disposal. By requiring that producers are responsible for the end use of their own products, by incorporating minimum recycled content standards, and by investing in our domestic recycling infrastructure, we are creating the structure and incentive to build better products and to close the loop for a circular economy. Having bills introduced in Washington, D.C. and in dozens of states across the country to make the polluters pay, to enact bottle bills, to require recycled content, to ban certain products, and to protect our environmental justice communities is an important initial giant step. However, we still need your help in the important work ahead to ensure that these bills can be passed without getting gutted or greenwashed along the way, and that they get signed into law. For far too long, Washington has ignored this crisis and the damage to the environment, as well as the health impacts that they produce to our frontline and fence line communities. This required advocates, as well as states and local governments, to step up, and that is exactly what you did. And I'm here today to tell you that from here on in, Congress is stepping up with you to break free from plastic pollution. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon in person. Bye now.
Okay, thank you to Representative Lowenthal for recording the video. And thank you again to all of you for joining us. Thank you to the wonderful speakers for your time and especially your leadership on this important issue. Please follow them on social media. We have all of the Twitter handles here for the speakers today to hear about what's happening. Follow us on social media to hear about what's happening. A special thanks to Haley Clinton, our Zero Waste associate, for being a rock star and making all this happen. Really appreciate it, Haley. We could not have done it without you. And one last thing, if you missed it at the beginning, you can all participate in our photo petition. Take a selfie with a sign, just like mine that I'm holding up, with your state against plastic pollution, and post it using the hashtag #UsAgainstPlastic. That's US, excuse me, against plastic. And with that, I think we're just out of time. Thank you again for attending. That's all for now. Have a great Friday.